Good evening, I'm Farhana Sheikh and you're watching Awani Tonight. Transition to endemic phase begins April 1st. International borders to reopen on the same day. And on International Women's Day, we discuss about having more women representation in boardrooms. That's coming up. Malaysia will enter the transition to endemic phase of COVID-19 on April 1st. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob says this is part of the exit strategy for the country to return to normalcy after more than 2 years of battling the pandemic.
Sehubungan dengan itu, setelah mengambil kira pelbagai faktor, melakukan penilaian risiko, mendapatkan pandangan Kementerian Kesihatan serta meneliti syur dari Menteri Kuartet, hari ini saya ingin mengumumkan bahawa negara akan memasuki fasa peralihan ke endemik bermula 1 April 2022.
However, he said the people will still need to wear a face mask in public and MySejahtera will remain in use. Ismail Sabri also announced that operation hours for businesses will no longer be limited and no social distancing are required at mosques and places of worship. Employees' capacity limit imposed at workplaces is also abolished, and all Malaysians can travel interstate regardless of their vaccination status. Not only that, the Prime Minister also announced the much-awaited border reopening, also scheduled on the same date of April 1st. Ismail Sabri says international visitors as well as Malaysian returnees who are fully vaccinated are not required to undergo quarantine upon arrival. They, however, must undergo a RT-PCR test 2 days before departure and a rapid test RTK 24 hours upon arrival. My Travel Pass will also be abolished for international travellers. They only need to download MySejahtera and fill in a pre-departure form in the app. For countries which are not broadly open for Malaysian travellers yet, Ismail Sabri said that vaccinated travel lanes still remain a viable option. More detailed SOP on reopening safely will be announced soon. The country's international borders have been shut since March 2020, during the first phase of the movement control order announced by the government then. The Federal Territories Ministry will study the need to upgrade the existing flood early warning system. Deputy Minister Datuk Seri Jalaluddin Alias says this would help ensure people receive information faster to save lives and properties. He added that the ministry is looking at a more organised drainage system project in Kuala Lumpur, as well as setting up a committee to ensure massive flash floods would not recur. On Monday, Kuala Lumpur was hit by a second round of flash floods in 3 months, after heavy rains across the city submerged hundreds of vehicles and caused power outages. Meanwhile, Federal Territories Minister Datuk Seri Shaidan Kasim was urged to review all proposed high-density housing projects in Kuala Lumpur in light of the frequent occurrence of flash floods in the city. Seputeh MP Teresa Kok, when debating the King's address at the Dewan Rakyat, noted how climate change had resulted in increased rainwater. She said more high-density housing projects will contribute to more flash floods as the city's drainage system in many areas has not been improved. Malaysia has no plans to impose sanctions on Russia, says Foreign Minister Datuk Seri Saifuddin Abdullah. While there has been global pressure to sanction Russia-linked businesses over the invasion of Ukraine, Saifuddin says Malaysia would only do so as part of a joint effort by the United Nations.
Prinsip kita ialah kita tak percaya kepada unilateral sanction. Sanction harus melalui United Nations. Dan sebagai ahli Human Rights Council, kita sudah mencadangkan bahawa pertama kita minta ceasefire, kedua rundingan itu diteruskan dan sekiranya perlu sanction boleh dilaksanakan, tapi kita belum sampai ke tahap tersebut.
He stressed that sanctions may impact innocent people unless they are meted out in a careful and targeted manner. In Southeast Asia, Singapore is the only country that had announced sanctions against Russia without going through the United Nations.
Meanwhile, a new batch of foreign workers is expected to arrive in May and June for the palm oil plantation sector after months of delay from an original plan to add more labour this year. Minister of Plantation Industries and Commodities, Dato' Zuraida Kamaruddin, says with the labour coming in, production will increase from 18.1 million tonnes last year to 20 million. About 80% of Malaysia's plantation workers are migrants, most of them from Indonesia. In September, Malaysia approved the recruitment of 32,000 migrant workers for palm plantations. They were expected to arrive around mid-February. The delay in the workers' arrival is likely to further impact harvesting and production and push prices up. Malaysia's Palm Oil Board expects the price of crude palm oil to continue to trade above 5,000 ringgit per tonne for the first half of 2022 due to the shortage of edible oil. Russia's invasion of Ukraine will also impact supply of edible oil globally, as both countries account for 80% of global exports of sunflower oil. We go for a quick break. Stay with us.
Semua yang terjadi adalah berita, tetapi tiada siapa yang boleh bawakan yang terkini dan tergempar seperti kami.
Dilihat hanya memberi wang tanpa matlamat yang tepat. Dia tidak melakukan apa-apa kesalahan.
Untuk mendapatkan jawapan yang bermakna, kita perlu soalan yang tepat.
Amat sedih dengan apa yang berlaku ke atas.
Tiada ruang untuk berita palsu.
Negara kita telah merekodkan kes harian baru sebanyak
hanya fakta yang diberikan.
Amat penting untuk meneruskan perjuangan negara melawan pandemik ini.
Sentiasa memastikan suara anda, suara rakyat didengari.
Kenapa?
Membawakan apa.
Welcome back. Women representation on the boards of the top 100 Malaysian public listed companies, PLCs, currently stood at 26.5%. This is according to data by 30% Club Malaysia. The group aims to achieve at least 30% target to not only promote diversity and inclusion, but also for companies to deliver better overall performance. On International Women's Day, we speak to Chair of 30% Club Malaysia, Amy Morris, on getting more women to be represented on the board.
Yes, progress has been made, but however, maybe the not so good news is that 1 out of 4 or 25% of all PLCs on Bursa Malaysia still have no women on their boards. That's quite astounding given that we are in 2022. And also the fact that overall, only 18% of all PLCs have reached the 30% mark.
Amy said a structured and systematic approach is needed to eliminate gender biases in companies.
You need to be always looking and monitoring and also measuring, because what gets measured gets done. To look at what is the entry level for between men and women. What are the promotion and recognition processes to move from one level to another? How does the overall corporate culture and DNA work to make sure that there is as much equitability and inclusivity? And also above all, something that perhaps doesn't get talked a lot about is making sure that women feel safe about calling out on bad behavior, whether amongst their peers, whether it's in their departments, and even in the boardrooms.
For women to break the bias imposed by society, women needs to be put in position of power.
Women empowerment is just not putting women in different roles. It is about also putting women in positions of power so that they have the awareness and consciousness to actually speak up, which is something that is on an increasing trend, but certainly can be done. There can be a lot more done in that respect, so that women in positions of power can really break the biases, whether conscious or unconscious.
Gender equality in politics should go beyond calls for parties to fill more female candidates. The reality remains that women face multiple obstacles to participating in political life. On Consider This, Melissa Idris asked our guests how to break down barriers. On to the latest developments in Ukraine. Ukraine began evacuating civilians from the northeastern city of Sumy and from the town of Irpin near the capital Kiev. Russia and Ukraine have agreed to establish humanitarian corridors to allow civilians to leave cities which have been besieged by Russian forces. A ceasefire will take place until 9 p.m. local time to allow civilians to escape. Earlier, Moscow had proposed to evacuate Ukrainians into Russia, but this has been rejected by Ukraine as a manipulation that will put people's life in danger. The Ukrainian side has called on the Russian authorities to respect the agreement on the ceasefire. In the past few days, Russian shelling has prevented the evacuation of civilians, despite announcing ceasefires. Meanwhile, Russia has stoked fears of an energy war, saying it may close its main gas pipeline to Germany if the West goes ahead with a ban on the Russian oil. The US had been exploring a potential ban with its allies as a way of punishing Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. Both Germany and the Netherlands had rejected the plan. Russia's Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak said Western countries could face oil prices of over $300 per barrel if governments follow through on threats to cut energy supplies from Russia. The EU gets about 40% of its gas and 30% of its oil from Russia. Novak warned Europe has no easy substitutes if supplies are disrupted, and it would take more than a year to replace the volume of oil it receives from Russia. Ukraine has implored the West to adopt such a ban, but there are concerns it would send prices soaring. On Monday, Brent crude oil hit its highest level in 14 years. Over in Australia, the death toll from severe flooding in the east coast of the country has risen to 20. Heavy rain continues to lash large parts of Sydney, prompting authorities to issue evacuation orders to thousands of people.
A red alert warning was also declared around the Manly Dam in Sydney as it begins overspilling amid intense flooding. Emergency services estimate around 70,000 to 80,000 people in the city face evacuation orders. Australia's eastern rivers were already near capacity following record downpours in several parts of Queensland and New South Wales states over recent weeks. Power and internet services were disrupted in several towns in Sydney. More rain is expected in the state. Authorities fear it will further hamper relief efforts. In the past 24 hours, emergency services have been called to 100 flood rescues across the state.
That is all we have for you on Awani Tonight. Get the latest news updates on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines from astroawani.com and the Astro Awani app. I'm Fahana Sheh. We'll see you again.